Minister, thank you very much indeed. With that sort of introduction, the only place you can go is down. So I hope I don't disappoint too much. Chief of Defence people responsible for the People Innovation Challenge, but I've left it very firmly in the very able hands of Air Vice Marshal Gary Tunnicliffe, who is the expert on this. I wanted to ask a question. When you think of people in defence, when you think of soldiers, sailors, members of the Royal Air Force, when you think of veterans, when you think of reserves, what's your view? What's your view of the defence person, if you like? What springs to mind? I think there are huge positives, and I think we see this in a lot of what we hear about. Very professional, dedicated, have great integrity. Our brave boys, to use a Sun headline of regular sort of use, although that, of course, has connotations for the fact that quite a lot of our people are women. We deliver. We're honourable. But there are also negatives, and you only need to read the papers, and the papers over the weekend, but the papers on a fairly regular basis. Some would say it's an old boys network who looks after each other. Some would say that we're overly macho. We're hard, actually uncaring. We send people to die. We have issues with some of our veterans, whether they're mental health issues or whether they're physical health issues with people who've been damaged in the wars that we've been fighting in the last 15 years. We shout a lot. That's something I keep on hearing from people who don't understand us. We shout a lot. We're not recruited. All you need to do is listen to the parliamentarians who say that we've had 5,000, 6,000 people who haven't turned up and we're not fully recruited. We're actually 95% recruited. If you read the papers, most people would think we're falling apart. Actually, 95% is not bad, but we'd prefer it to be larger. And at worst, if you like, and this is something which personally annoys me hugely when we're compared to the size of Wellington's army at the Battle of Waterloo, and we're about the same size as we were then, or a little bit smaller, ignoring the fact that actually we've had 200 years of innovation in our armed forces. At worst, we're unskilled cannon fodder sent by generals into battle without the proper equipment or the proper diagnostics. And of course, we're white, and we're male, and we're all straight, aren't we? So, what's today about? Today is about not solving all of these issues, because I would contend that every single one of those negatives that I said are wrong, but I would have to prove it to you. But it is, I would ask you, to think in the back of your mind, what are we trying to change here? We are actually trying to change culture a little bit. You only need to look at the adverts that the army used, where there was one word that they used, and it was repeated time and time and time again, and that is belonging. It wasn't macho, it wasn't kill. We don't want psychopaths in our armed forces. We want intelligent, thinking people who make the right decision, not necessarily just the decision to kill. So we don't want psychopaths. We want people who belong to an organisation, who are proud to belong to an organisation. And it's really interesting that actually that campaign, despite being pilloried by an awful lot of senior officers who have left the armed forces, actually doubled the number of people interested in the armed forces and in the army. Doubled. That's quite impressive from a campaign that was supposedly not macho enough for our own people. So we are talking about a culture of engagement, and how do we improve that? We are talking about recruiting and retention. Of course we are. But we must make defence attractive. When we first exposed this idea of innovation in the people space, we asked a whole load of industry, a whole load of businesses who we get on very well with and we meet on a regular basis, say, how would you characterise this innovation event? And they said, it's very, very simple. How do you attract people to join in the first place, and how do you attract people to stay for as long as you want them and as long as they want to? So just one word, attract. And it was tempting to just give you one word, attract. Now just innovate, please. Just sort of give us the answers. But you came back, actually, and we came back and said that probably isn't sensible. And the Treasury has a word on its lips all the time. You'll hear it in connection to the nurses. You'll hear it in connection to all the pay decisions that are going to take place over the next 6 months. And that's productivity. How do we improve the productivity of the public workforce? And in our case, how do you improve the productivity of the armed forces? We would say that actually, one of my favourite statistics is that sitting alongside Her Majesty's ship Queen Elizabeth, which is our brand new aircraft carrier, fantastic, the most exciting aircraft carrier in the world, by far the most sophisticated aircraft carrier in the world, has a crew of about 850. When you add the Fleet Air Arm bit on it, it's a bit more. But 850 to run the most sophisticated ship in the world. HMS Victory had a crew of 850, and it sits just alongside. Now, that happened to be the most sophisticated ship in the world at the time, but that, I would say, is productivity. That's a little bit of productivity over 200 years. But the point I make is, how do we, as a contingent force, improve our productivity? How do we persuade people that actually we are incredibly productive? And I think there's some innovation required there. So what do we want from today and from the challenge that will take place in May? We want innovative ideas that would work in our environment. As the Minister said, we're base-fed. We come from the bottom and we go to the top. Unique in some areas. We ask people to do things that the country asks nobody else to do at all. Nobody else goes out there deliberately to kill or be killed. That is our mission. We defend this country. That makes us unique. Nobody else has that remit. Where experience is almost as important or more important, depending on the circumstance, than qualifications. And that's completely different to most of the world, where we really wouldn't want to put one of you, let's say, who's never been in the armed forces, as a lieutenant colonel commanding a battle group in the middle of Helmand. Just like that, as lateral entry. I think that the risk that that would cause too many deaths, and that's what we're talking about, is too great. So we can't laterally recruit everywhere, but there are areas where we should laterally recruit, and we can laterally recruit, and we're after ideas. We're after best practice, not just imported ideas from other people, best practice that fit our organisation. So perhaps translate it into our particular circumstances. How do we recruit into a profession to inspire people, and that's never changed, but in an environment where actually the culture of the youngster is not to go into a profession for life, is not to have a career for life, as we understand it. You may tell us we're wrong. You may tell us that they would really like that, but can't get us anywhere else, and perhaps that's our USP. But everything we're being told is actually they don't want that. How do we gain access to the skills? The Minister again mentioned it. Skills in an increasingly competitive environment. I would argue we're producing nothing like enough STEM qualified individuals from our schools. But that's a 15-year job to improve that. For the next 15 years, we can't wait for those skills to come out of our schools. We need to start looking. How do we do that? Do we create our own? That's been the traditional model in the armed forces, is we train somebody from nothing to give them all the skills they need. Is that really, it's a very expensive way of doing it, is that really the only way? Are there better ideas out there? How to keep our people for longer? How do we encourage them that leaving doesn't need to be forever and that they can come back? I use a phrase a lot, which is leave well, rejoin well. Let's have enough people actually being encouraged, not encouraged to leave, but once they've decided to leave, encouraged to think well of their previous employer, us, so much so that they might want to come back. If you look at most companies now, they're doing a huge amount to try and keep people because they've spent a lot of money and a lot of experience skilling them up. So why wouldn't we do the same? Leaving the armed forces is something that, to my mind, should not be a permanent. It should be a temporary. You leave for a bit, you come back and bring all those fantastic experiences in civilian life back in. How can we do that? How can we improve that? How can we make that better? How do we motivate, engage, and stimulate our people so that they do stay? What is it that we need? Now, you'll hear, or many people who've been in the armed forces will say that actually war is the best recruiting sergeant we can have. Okay? I would not necessarily disagree with that, but we're not at war. And we're not doing major operations. Funnily enough, the Air Force is. The Air Force is probably more committed than they have been. You don't know about it because funnily enough, it doesn't seem to resonate with the sun as much as the infantry going into Helmand. But actually the Air Force are more committed than they've been, arguably, since the Second World War. And they aren't having a problem recruiting. Because people who want to fly want to drop bombs or whatever it is they want to do, and there's opportunity. And one that I have particular concern about, how do we keep people physically fit, mentally fit? I don't talk about mental health, I talk about mental fitness. Think of the connotations of that. Physical fitness, you talk about having a trainer sometimes, you talk about going and doing it every day because you know that your body needs that sort of physical fitness. Well, think of that in terms of mental fitness. Why don't we have trainers who go along and do that for you? Why don't you think every day about mental fitness and actually improve your mental fitness? And then the other one I would say is societal fitness. How can we make sure that our people are fully integrated into society so that when they come out of the armed forces, it isn't a complete cliff edge, which many people say it is today? And throughout, and you would expect me to say this as the head of people in defence, we want to encourage the maximum diversity. I talk a lot about diversity of thought, about inclusion. How do we do that? Because we're not very good at it at the moment. How do we improve the diversity of thought? What ideas have you got that I think if we improve our diversity, we have a more inclusive workforce, more people will stay? This is not altruism. This is not a pink agenda. This is not the moral case. This is pure business. We want the best people to stay, regardless of where they come from, what they look like, or what their proclivities are. I don't care. What I do care is that I want somebody who is really good quality. And I want to keep them for as long as they're interested and as long as I'm interested. We have lots of ideas, lots and lots and lots of ideas. In fact, we're not short of ideas in some respects. But we don't know whether they're the right ideas. I'm constantly challenging my team to say, have we just run out of ideas, novel ideas, because actually everything we do we seem to have thought of before? Have we run out of ideas, or are there no other ideas out there? For me, that's the challenge to you. Give us the ideas. Come up with some ideas that are genuinely innovative, genuinely different. Don't try and repeat what we've done before and see if it will work in our environment. We are unique in many respects, but we're not so unique that some of the things that you might do in civilian life, some of the things that you might do elsewhere, actually would work in our environment. We just haven't thought about it. And bear in mind that I've spent 37 years in the army or something. The front row here have all spent 30-something years in the army or the navy or the air force, whichever force it is. We're slightly culturally attuned to what we do. We need people who aren't like that to come and say, actually, by the way, have you thought about that? Have you got an idea here that you've never thought of simply because it's never happened before? That's what I'm after. That's what we're after from you. Something that's genuinely innovative, but will work in our environment. Because if it doesn't work in our environment, the country's not defended, and you're the worse off. Thank you.